mom is in jail, been for about 10. I'm Diana, and my relationship with my mom has always been pretty interesting. You see, my mom is in jail, and has been for about 10 years now. I live with my older sister who has done her best to look after me, but it's just not the same as having a mom around. It isn't her fault that she's in jail. My dad didn't treat her very well. One night, she took the money out of their joint account and ran away for her own protection. She even had to leave me behind to try and escape him, but the police caught her trying to leave the country with the money. The court didn't believe her and she ended up being charged with fraud and being sentenced to years in prison. I try my best to keep my mom happy. I bring her presents and I cook her favorite cakes and bring them to her in prison, but they never seem to make her happy. She's so unhappy in jail that I just can't do anything to fix it. Well, at least she is one of the most popular women with the other inmates, as she told me. They even call her Rocky as she's so tough. No one will dare to mess with her. So, with Mother's Day coming up, I knew I had to do something really special to make her happy, and I had the best idea. I thought I would do something different, and something big. I hired a plane to do some skywriting in the sky above her prison. I thought when she and her prison friends saw it, she would be so happy. And I was going to surprise her by skydiving out of the plane, too. When it got to the day of my skydive, I got really nervous. I don't like heights. When I was up in the plane, the man literally had to push me out. I was so scared. But once in the sky, I was having so much fun. I really started to enjoy it. As I was falling to earth, I was so happy. I could see all the inmates in the yard below and knew that my mom would be there watching. I looked up and saw the plane in the sky riding in pink smoke. Happy Mother's Day, Rocky. I was so pleased. Then I pressed the button on my backpack and it released more pink smoke, my mom's favorite color. I was so excited. Mom would definitely see me now. But I hadn't anticipated one thing. I couldn't see. There was smoke everywhere. I started coughing and spluttering and my eyes were sore. Then I started to worry. I knew that I had to release my parachute, but it was so smoky I couldn't see the pull cord. I started feeling all over myself trying to find the cord, but I just couldn't get a hold of it. Then I looked below me and I was near the ground. I knew if I didn't pull the cord soon, then I would be in big trouble. I finally found the cord and pulled it. I felt the parachute open up, but it was too late. I was traveling too fast and I was going to hit the floor with a bang. I closed my eyes and braced myself. I landed on my back with lots of women in orange jumpsuits gathered around me. Then some prison guards ran over to me. It was pretty scary. Some of them had guns. There was a lot of shouting going on. I looked around. I couldn't see my mom anywhere. I became aware that I couldn't feel my legs. I looked down and realized they were sticking out at funny angles. I let out a scream and then passed out. I woke up in the hospital with lots of doctors and nurses working on me. There was blood everywhere. I must have passed out again as I woke up a few days later with both of my legs in plaster. It turned out my parachute had opened, but I still hit the ground really hard. I had landed right in the middle of the prison yard. I should have died, but by some miracle I had only broken my legs. The next day I was discharged from the hospital. I rolled outside and waited for my sister to come and collect me. But she didn't turn up. Instead, a police van pulled up in front of me. An officer got out and asked me my name. When I said who I was, he told me that I was under arrest. I was wheeled into the back of the van and driven off. I was so scared. I had never gotten into trouble in my life. They wouldn't even tell me why I was being arrested. We got to a large building and stopped outside. I was wheeled in and they finally told me. I was being arrested for breaking into the women's prison. I told them that it was an accident, that I was trying to surprise my mom for Mother's Day, but they didn't believe me. I asked where I was going, but they didn't answer. They just wheeled me into a room where 2 men were waiting. I realized they were prison guards. I was being put in prison. After changing into my orange jumpsuit, I was led through a door into a big cafeteria. The prison officer told me sarcastically that I was lucky as I had just arrived in time for lunch. He laughed and left me. All the prisoners in the room turned around and stared at me. This really tough-looking woman walked up to me and looked like she was going to start threatening me. Before she could say anything, I told her that she'd better watch out, as my mom was Rocky, and if she messed with me, she'd have to answer to her. The woman's tough face dropped, then she started laughing. She told me that the nickname Rocky was ironic. She wasn't tough. She was a wimp and a liar who everyone hated. I then got really angry at the woman and said that my mom would be out of the prison soon anyway, that she didn't even deserve to be in prison with her and everyone else. She started laughing even more and said that my mom was in jail for child abandonment and she wasn't innocent. I couldn't believe it. Why was she saying that? After eating the worst meal I had ever had, I wheeled around the prison until I found Mom. I asked her about what the woman said. She said that yes, she had abandoned me. She had never wanted me and she'd lied about why she'd gone to prison. She had stolen my dad's money and had left me in a car to go and start a new life. He was the innocent one in this, not her. She said that I was such a stupid girl, I always believed her lies. Then she told me that she was going to be released in 2 months. So she would be in the real world and I would be the one stuck in prison. Then I saw who she really was. All my life I had idolized her and tried to impress her, and I could have died trying to make her happy, and it was a lie. Well, I had had enough. For the next few weeks in prison, I kept my head low. Luckily, people left me alone. I used my time to think up a plan for revenge. One day, my sister came to visit me. When she arrived, she already knew of my plan. She'd always known what my mom was really like. It was just that I'd spent so many years thinking my mom was wonderful, I had refused to believe it. When the guards weren't looking, she slipped a small package into my cast. Later on that day, I waited until Mom left her cell. We hadn't spoken for weeks, so I had to sneak in. I got the package out of my cast. It was lots of packets of cigarettes. I took one out, then hid the rest inside her pillow. Then I lit the remaining cigarette and let the smoke fill up the room. I chucked it under her bed, then got out of there as quickly as possible. I waited a while, then I told a guard I could smell something funny coming down the hall. The guard sniffed the air. He could smell the smoke. My plan was working. He would find the cigarettes and think she was selling them to the other inmates, and she would get a longer sentence. That would serve her right for lying to me for all these years. But as the guard ran in, the fire alarm went off. I must have started a fire. We all had to evacuate. We were escorted outside as the prison went up in flames. But the big yard we'd been in had led out to an open gate. Some of the inmates saw it and made a run for it. There were so many people on the run that the guards couldn't stop them. And one of the inmates escaping was Mom. As she ran out to her freedom, she turned and gave me a wicked smile. I didn't try to get away. I was innocent, and besides, I was in a wheelchair. But I was so angry seeing my mom getting away. The fire was put out pretty quickly, and we were all moved back into the prison. 20 inmates had escaped, and over the next few days, they were all found and brought back to jail. The only prisoner they couldn't locate was my mom. A week after that was my court date. I was let off with a warning as they understood that it was a stunt gone wrong, not a break-in attempt. As the verdict was read out, I looked around the courtroom. I could see someone I recognized watching from the back. It was my mom. She was wearing a wig and a fake nose, but it was definitely her. I moved back in with my sister and life got back to normal. But I was always expecting my mom to turn up again one day. About a year later, there was a knock on the door late at night. I opened it and my mom was there. She pushed past me to get in. She begged me to help her. She'd been on the run for so long now. She looked different. She'd had plastic surgery to change how she looked. She claimed to be working as a spy, helping to rid the world of injustice and helping others like a superhero minus the powers. But there was a problem. If she was caught and taken back to jail, her good work would have to end. She needed me to go drive her to the border where someone was going to meet her and help her escape the country where she could carry on doing good. I agreed to help. She hid in the back of my car and I put a blanket over her. I drove in the dark with my lights out until we reached our destination. The men were there to meet us, but when I opened the boot and pulled the blanket off of her, she saw it wasn't the man she expected to see. It was the police. She looked at me in shock. I smiled to her and said, "That serves you right, Rocky." What did you think of my story? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more.
Hi, I'm Eliza. When I turned 18, I had to deal with the unthinkable. A few months after a car accident, I found myself crawling across a hospital floor in pain. I felt like I wasn't going to make it. I couldn't move my legs and I kept crying for help, but nothing came out. It was then that I realized someone had poisoned me. This wasn't an accident. They wanted me to die here. Before we get to that horrible moment in my life, I have to tell you how I ended up in that hospital in the first place. One night, my mother was driving me home. We had been fighting for a while, and I said some horrible things to her. You see, my mom always acted like she didn't want me at all. She had for most of my life, but a few months before this, my father passed away. It was really sudden, and I never even got to go to the funeral. Since then, my mom had been weird. We were struggling with money and her whole demeanor changed. She was just mean. She constantly made me feel like I was going crazy. After the fight died down, I started taking some videos to send to my friends. That's when it happened. Everything went white. I heard a loud crash and in an instant I was lying on the road. I was in so much pain. Had someone just hit us? What happened? Everything was hazy after that. I heard sirens and doctors. Everyone seemed so panicked. Was I dying? I felt like I was in a bad dream or something. I kept blacking out from the pain. Something had to be broken. A lot of things felt broken. I was in and out for a while. But then I remember waking up in a hospital bed. I could barely open my eyes. It's almost like they were swollen or something. I could hear my mom talking in hushed voices to someone. She was talking about caskets and flowers. I wanted to call out to her to tell her that I was okay, but I couldn't talk or move. What was wrong with me? That's when I heard my mom say the word funeral. I could tell she was crying, and that's when it hit me. She meant my funeral. Was I going to die? Couldn't they tell I was alive, that I was awake? Before I could do anything, I heard a lot of beeping. I tried to move, to do anything, but the room went black again. I'm not sure how much later it was, but I heard my mom's voice again. She was talking to a man asking how much longer it would be. Did she mean until I died? Until I woke up? I had to show her that I was okay. She had to be so worried about me. I opened my eyes, really opened my eyes. I felt like I had never seen light before. I gasped at how bright the light coming in from the window was, and in that moment, I saw my mom. I tried to smile at her. I was okay. She rushed over to me, but her expression wasn't happiness or joy. It was like surprise and horror. Did I really look that horrible? I started to panic. Was my face deformed or something? Was I missing limbs? I'd never seen her look that horrified. A loud beep rang out once my mom was beside me. I suddenly couldn't breathe. I felt my mom's hands on my chest as she yelled for help. After that, I think I was asleep for a really long time. When I woke up, there was a nurse in my room. She freaked out when she saw me alive. She told me I had been in a coma for 6 months. I couldn't believe it. 6 months? What had I missed? What did I look like? I tried to sit up, but she just told me to lay back and relax. That's when my doctor came in. I felt kind of nervous when I saw him. He had this coldness with him, like he was going to freeze a room just walking into it. He handed me a container of liquid and told me to drink it, that I would feel better once I did. I told him I didn't want to, and he shoved it in my hands, yelling at me to drink it. You'd think someone would be a little nicer to a girl who just got out of a coma. I managed to pretend to drink the liquid. The doctor left, saying he would call my mom. When I heard she was on her way, I could barely handle how excited I was. My mom walked in about 10 minutes later, but I hardly recognized her. She was wearing a fur coat. Her hair was done beautifully, and she carried a luxury purse. We had been so poor before. Had she won the lottery while I was in a coma? Seriously, how much had I missed? The doctor told me I was going to have to work to get my strength back up. But I was ready. I had a second chance at life, and I wasn't going to waste it. Over the next couple of days, things were really awkward. You see, I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair trying to relearn absolutely everything. My face was all beat up and my nose was crooked. I looked like a monster. Then there was that doctor. I felt like he was always watching me. He was so hostile. I started to feel like he was out to get me. I had this fear that something bad was going to happen. One day during therapy, my worst fears came true. In the middle of trying to walk, one of my crutches completely came apart. I fell on the ground hard and cracked my head open. There was blood everywhere. When I looked up, the doctor was just standing there. When my mom came in after the incident, I told her how weird the doctor was being. To my surprise, my mom told me to avoid him. She even told me she'd talk to the office about getting me a doctor I was more comfortable with. I was kind of shocked. My mom had never done things like that for me before the accident. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt lonely and every bone in my body really ached. I kept hoping someone would help me or bring me some medicine or something. Of course, the doctor came in. He handed me a cup of tea and told me to just relax. I was wary at first, but the tea looked so warm and comforting, so I drank it. All of a sudden, I felt a horrible pain in my stomach. I dropped the cup of tea and it shattered into a million pieces. No one came running in. The doctor didn't even move a muscle. I yelled to him that it felt like my insides were trying to crawl outside my body, like my stomach was trying to kill me. Thank God he's here, I thought. But he shrugged. He told me to stop overreacting and to just go to sleep. He said I'd feel better if I slept for a while. What? How did this crazy person expect me to be able to sleep in this much pain? He got up and left the room. I could hardly see straight. I knew I wasn't overreacting. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I started crawling across the ground, dragging my legs behind me. I felt helpless. The pain was so intense. I managed to get to the door of my room, and that's when I saw them. My mom and the doctor kissing. What on earth was going on? I hovered in the doorway, trying to keep from screaming, trying to listen. The doctor was talking about how much insurance money they were about to make. My mom thanked the doctor for doing what he did. But what had he done? I clutched my stomach in pain. Had I been poisoned?
You don't need Australia's best network until you do.
Tired of cleansers that leave skin dull? The power of micellar with the glow of rosewater. New Garnier Micellar Rosewater Cleanser.
I strained to hear what they were saying as they walked away. The doctor told her they had to find my phone no matter what, that there was too much evidence on it. The two got in the elevator and I was alone. I crawled across the floor, desperate to find someone. Was I going to die here? Alone? Had I seriously just been poisoned by a doctor? I felt the room around me start to get dark. With the strength I had left, I made it into the bathroom in my hospital room and made myself sick. I had to get the poison out of me, but I was just in so much pain. I laid on the floor, not knowing if I was going to make it. In those couple of hours, all I could think about was my dad. If he was still around, would any of this have happened? Within a few hours, I started to feel more normal. So, I decided I had to find my phone at the crash site. If there was evidence on it, I had to find it. I got my crutches and called myself a cab. I had to sneak out of the back of the hospital. Even then, I was almost positive the doctor had seen me. I managed to get myself in a cab and I directed him to the site of the car accident. The guardrail was still bent. I told him to just let me go here, but he waited to help me look. What could possibly be on my phone? I know I had been recording when the accident happened. Maybe there was evidence that the crash was my mom's fault? That she was drunk or something? After what seemed like hours, I found my phone in a bush. I yanked it off the ground, covered it in grime and dust. As soon as we got back to the car, the cab driver helped me plug in my phone. I turned it on and opened my videos. Nothing could prepare me for the last video I took. I looked normal in it, happy. I was recording myself singing to the radio to send to a friend. Beside me, my mom looked so mad. Then, it happened. My mom reached across and unbuckled my seatbelt. I flinched in shock, but it was too late. My mom swerved the car and it flipped over the guardrail. Then, the screen went black. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own mom had crashed our car. But for what? It all dawned on me. The nurses being shocked I wasn't getting better, the new purses my mom had, her kissing the doctor poisoning me, the time I flatlined after I woke up. They had all been her and the doctor's doing. I didn't know what to do. My own mom had tried to kill me. She and the doctor made sure I was in a coma just so they could take my insurance money. In my anger and sadness, I called the police. The trial was fast, but my heart broke. I was in a coma just so they could take my insurance money. In my anger and sadness, I called the police. The trial was fast, but my heart broke over and over again. The most shocking part? My dad showed up. He walked to the trial, and when he announced his name, I knew who he was. He started talking on the stand. My head was spinning. What on earth was going on? My dad explained that he had been looking for me for a very long time since his wife left me for another man. After she had kidnapped me and used me as a way to make money with that doctor, she made sure my dad will never find us. And then, my dad confessed that she wasn't even my biological mother. She was my stepmom pretending to be my mom. We didn't even share the same genes. I was so shocked. But then I understood why she cared so little about me. She never even saw me as her real daughter. But everything made sense now. Despite the shock that I was in and all that I've been through, I was happy to know that my dad was around now to take care of me. As for the woman I used to call my mom, well, I hope she rots in jail. How did you like my story of betrayal and mystery? Has anyone ever lied to you like this or tried to hurt you? Let us know in the comments down below.
Hello, my name is Hannah, and I don't really know how to start my story or where to even begin. Everything happened way too fast, and then it spiraled out of control. I never expected that I'd have to stop my own mom from making mistakes in order to protect my family from being destroyed. I also never expected that my mom would start acting like a teenager. But today, after trying for so long and after shedding way too many tears, things are finally back to the way they should be. I live with my mom, dad, and my little brother. Ever since I was little, I've had to get used to my parents' constant fighting. But those fights would soon dissolve, and afterwards, we'd go back to living normally again. I used to always tell myself that it was okay. All grown-ups have their own problems and their own way of solving them. The important thing was that our family stay strong and together despite all the arguments. However, that thought didn't last long. One night, I was sitting in my room playing on the computer when I heard my dad's voice yelling loudly. It was the first time they've ever acted this way. I snuck out of my room and hid behind the couch so I could see what was happening. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I was scared for them, myself, and my brother. Their fight didn't end until my mom left the house, slamming the door behind her. Hard. My dad closed his bedroom door and went to sleep, as if he couldn't care less about everything that had just happened. This was the very first time my mom left the house after a fight and went out during the night. And in the middle of my confusion and despair, I didn't know what else to do but go back to my own room. I laid in bed and closed my eyes, but I couldn't get their hurtful words out of my mind. Their argument was all I could think about. My mom calling my dad useless and bossy and telling him she can no longer bear him or his actions, and my dad calling her a selfish woman who doesn't care about anyone but herself. After an hour of tossing and turning in bed, I gave up on sleeping. My mom still hadn't returned home and I was getting more worried and scared by the minute. I opened the window and started looking at the road, waiting for her to get back. But apparently, while I was waiting, I fell asleep. The next moment, I was waking up to my mom nudging my shoulder, telling me it was time for school. "Where were you?" I asked her. "What do you mean, sweetheart? I was here all night." I knew she was lying, but I didn't say anything. That day seemed to last forever, but finally it was over. Or so I thought anyway. That night, my parents returned to their fighting. My mom started it, but this time they were doing it in front of me and my brother. My little brother hid behind me, and soon after, my father went to his room again and shut the door. He was obviously trying to avoid my mom, who was acting crazy. And my mom, once again, left the house. I was left with my little brother, trying to make sense of the whole situation. That night, my brother slept in my room because he was afraid, and I stayed on the porch waiting for my mom to return. After 3 hours, she returned home in a stranger's car. She got out of the car and he followed her. But what I saw next shocked me to the core. This stranger who drove my mom home in the middle of the night kissed her. I couldn't believe it. Who was he, and what gave him the right to kiss my mom? Once she was inside the house, I snapped out of my shock and ran to my bed. I could feel her opening the door to check up on me and make sure I was asleep. She wanted to make sure no one had caught her. The next morning, my dad went out early for work as usual, and my brother and I sat down for breakfast. My brother seemed fine again and wolfed down his food. He was just a kid who didn't understand what was happening around him. I, on the other hand, was staring down at my plate without touching my breakfast. I kept thinking, should I ask her about what I saw yesterday? I looked at her and noticed she was wearing a new short purple dress. And she was wearing makeup. My mom only dressed like this on special occasions. I asked her, "Where did you go yesterday?" "Just popped out for some fresh air, sweetheart," she replied. "Why are you so dressed up today? Are you invited to some event?" I asked. "No, I just wanted to look nice for a change," she said. Once again, she wasn't being honest with me. I was sure she was keeping a huge secret from me. I said to her in a sarcastic tone, "You look beautiful." Deep down, I'd hoped she'd realize that I knew her secret, but that didn't happen. From that day on, I felt that our lives had been turned upside down. My dad spent most of his time at work in order to avoid my mom's repetitive yelling and blaming everything on him. And whenever he got back home, he'd only eat, then sleep. My mom was still sneaking out of our house every night, assuming that none of us noticed. The whole situation was unbearable. I felt so angry at her. I mean, she was going to break this family apart, and there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't tell my dad because that would only make things much worse. And I couldn't stand up to my mom and call her a liar without having any proof. I knew she sneaked out after we went to school because she was dressing up in the morning, which was unlike her. But I couldn't confirm it, except if I found some sort of proof. Her phone was still on the dining room table, and she was busy, so I stole it, put it in my pocket, went to my own room, and started reading her messages. I found a message between him and her agreeing to meet up at 3 o'clock in some coffee shop. Fortunately, this coffee shop happened to be close to my school. I returned the phone without her noticing anything. If I'd been a second late, my mom would have caught me red-handed, and then the whole plan would have never succeeded. I got lucky. At exactly 3 p.m., I was hiding in a corner, waiting for...
Is this you? Is this you? Why?
Sorry, babe. Gotta look out for my allies. It had to be done.
Welcome to the Rise of Kingdoms. I have the power of Egypt and my allies are awesome. This guy doesn't even stand a chance. That's my army, and I'm gonna get my general
for my mom's arrival. When I saw her entering the coffee shop, I waited a few seconds, then snuck in after her and sat on a table out of their view. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mom was laughing like a teenager loudly with him, all while he had his hand resting on her shoulder. The whole thing was unacceptable, and what made things even worse was that he was kissing her. I couldn't stop myself. I jumped right in her face, pointed my finger at her, and screamed, "Cheater! You think that I don't know? I know everything. You can't lie to me this time. I'm going to tell everyone that you're a cheater." She looked at me with anger, pulled me outside, and started screaming at me. I couldn't believe she had the audacity to not be embarrassed by her actions. I felt so ashamed of being her daughter. I hated her. I hated everything she was doing to us. This wasn't my mom. If she truly was, she wouldn't have chosen another man over my father. Who did she think she was? My only goal was to take revenge on her for disregarding me, my brother, and father so easily. I no longer wanted this woman to be my mom. I decided that I was going to tell my dad everything once we were all sat round the table together. I'd tell him everything I knew without fear, and I'd relish looking at my mom's face as she tried to hide it with her hands. Face filled with embarrassment and humiliation, but I simply couldn't. At night, when we were all sitting together around the table, everything was going fine. My mom was acting like the perfect mother, Dad was relaxed, and my brother, for the first time in so long, looked happy and full of energy. They all looked like they used to before. I was the only one who knew that my mom was just putting on an act, but I was so scared of breaking my family apart. My mom looked at me normally, and I wanted to slap myself for acting like nothing was going on. I spent nights blaming myself for my moment of weakness. Not only did I let my chance slip, but I also helped my mom continue to cheat on my dad. I didn't want my mom to continue with her lies and her betrayal. But at the same time, I had to find the right solution. At last, I decided that I need to make that intruder disappear so that Mom would have no other choice but to return to us. I decided to do something to the man's car. I told myself maybe if I wrecked his car, he wouldn't come back here anymore. This seemed like a good plan to me, and every night I waited for my mom to get out of the car. One night, I waited behind a little tree in our backyard, holding a huge rock, ready for my mission. Once my mom's lover arrived, I threw the rock at the back of his car. The glass shattered. He got out of his car to search for the culprit, with fire blazing in his eyes. But then he saw me standing in front of him, daringly, showing him that I wouldn't stand aside until he stopped his relationship with my mom, and his face fell. My mom called my name firmly. She pointed with her hand for me to get inside the house, but I stood firm as a nail without budging, staring right ahead into her lover's eyes with rage and resentment. He looked at her, then entered his car without as much as saying even a hello. The next morning, my mom was waiting for me in the kitchen. "We need to talk about your rude behavior yesterday," she said. "My rude behavior?" I lashed out. "You're the one acting selfishly. You're acting like a teenager, not caring about anyone but yourself." I wanted to call her a cheater, but I stopped myself because my little brother was listening beside me to everything being said. Once again, I felt as if I'd helped her with her betrayal, but this time I didn't care as much because I thought that I taught her lover a lesson, and that he'd be an idiot if he came back. However, it was I who was the idiot. Despite what I'd done, nothing changed. My mom kept on talking and laughing with him like a teenager on the phone for hours. She kept on wearing her short dresses and going out with him. So I upped my game and decided I'd need to do something even worse this time. If he wasn't bothered by the broken glass, he surely would be once he found out my mom's real opinion of him. I got his phone number from my mom's phone without her noticing. I started sending him messages telling him that my mom keeps on calling him fat and that she wants to break up with him, but that she didn't know how to tell him that, and that she feels so stupid when she is with him. He didn't answer any of my texts, but at least his car no longer came to pick up my mom. I thought this was a victory I could be proud of, but the next morning I heard her whispering on the phone in the kitchen. She was apologizing to him for my rude behavior, saying that I made all that up to keep him away from her, and that none of what I said was true. I heard her begging him to meet up so she could make it up to him. The problem wasn't that he was clinging to my mom, as I thought at first, but the other way around. My mom was the one who wouldn't let go. All this time, I was trying to keep him away, whereas I should have been trying to keep her away from him. This plan would be more difficult, because even though she knew that I knew about her betrayal, and even though she saw me trying to stop her from doing it, she never cared, and didn't even think about breaking up with him. She didn't care that while she was having a good time with her lover outside the house, her daughter was burning with anger, so why would she care to leave him if I asked her to? I was left with no other solution but to make her feel the loss because of her choice. How would I do that? By feigning sickness. That night, while we were having dinner, I pretended to pass out. I fell on the ground and started to fake some violent shivering and shaking. I was acting out a scene I'd seen on TV on a medical program about epilepsy. I did
Dry, itchy skin? QV Intensive with Ceramides supports the skin barrier to help keep moisture in and irritate
everything step by step, and I was sure not to do anything wrong that might have exposed me. While I was faking it, I was aware of everything around me. It was a shock for everyone. My dad ran towards me, and my brother stayed frozen in his place. My mom kept going left and right, not sure which direction she should choose. When those seconds were over, my mom ran to me and hugged me strongly. I felt as if her heart was going to break out of her chest because of how fast it was beating. Maybe this was going to work, I thought to myself. I pretended to have a headache that night. Neither of my parents could understand what had happened. Together, they took me to my room, tucked me into my bed, and didn't leave until I was fast asleep. The next morning, my mom was wearing her home clothes. When she saw me, she stood next to me and took my hand, afraid that I might fall. She sat me down on the couch and then asked me how I was feeling today. "I'm good," I answered. She was looking at me with pity. She was feeling guilty. After staring at me for a few seconds, she said, "I called a doctor. He said that perhaps what happened with you yesterday was because of you being tired or overthinking. So I called the school and told them you'd be absent today. I'm going to spend the whole day with you." That made me feel good. However, my goal wasn't for just one day, but forever. That night, I waited until my whole family gathered again around the dining table so I could again fake fainting. This time, I acted the role better, and just as I expected, I got a whole night of attention. I continued on this act night after night until I was taken to the hospital. Okay, I didn't think that my lie was going to go this far, but everything had gone much better than I'd expected. While my mom was staying up to take care of me all night, my dad came and brought her a cup of coffee. He sat beside her and she put her head on his shoulder. I hadn't seen my parents sit this close to each other for a long time. That made me feel really good. My plan had worked, I said to myself. I only had to ensure that my mom had broken up with that idiot. It took a few days for the doctor to permit me to go back home. On the way back, my mom and dad were talking about the day I was born, how beautiful it was for them to hold their own child. And in the end, my mom said to my dad, "I love you. I love you all." Day after day, life was getting back to normal. My dad left for work and I went back to school. But I still wasn't sure about my mom. Every day, I stood behind the door in order to listen in on her calls, but I didn't hear anything suspicious. Then one day, my mom's phone rang while she was sitting with us, and I noticed her discomfort. She took her phone and went into another room. Without anyone noticing, I followed her. I heard her talking to him. Yes, it was that man calling her. But I heard her saying, I already told you. I want to stay with my husband and family. I don't want to go out with you again or even talk to you after today. She hung up and quickly went outside. She saw me. As she got closer to me, I thought I'm definitely going to get punished for eavesdropping, but what happened was different from before. She pulled me into her arms and started crying. What's wrong? Mom? What's going on? I yelled, worried. She looked at me, eyes sparkling with tears. Nothing in this whole wide world can replace you in my heart. I was wrong, I admit that, but I paid the price. Seeing her like that broke my heart. This was my real mom, the mom who'd disappeared. She was finally back. I needed to ease up her guilt. I needed to tell her the truth. Mom, there is something I have to tell you, I told her. Sure, sweetheart, she replied as she stroked my hair. So I continued. To be honest, I lied to you. To all of you. There wasn't any other solution. I didn't want our family to fall apart because of your mistakes. I tried to make you come back, but all my attempts ended up in failure. I lied to you about my sickness. I wasn't sick, I only pretended to be sick so I could have all your attention focused on me, and it worked. She looked at me, and I was sure her word in my heart. I wasn't thinking about anyone but myself back then. I'm sorry for not reacting to your attempts, even though I noticed them. The most important thing is that you're okay, and that we're still together. What did you think of my story? Please tell me in the comments section below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.